Welcome back. We are talking to Jennifer Elia, and we're talking about how to avoid homeschool overwhelm. And before the break, we discussed how sometimes we expect things to look a certain way, but it can never really look that way because that's not reality. And I think we have this idea that we need to look like this Pinterest perfect homeschool mom
Yes.
because we see it on Pinterest,
Mhm.
we see it on Facebook, we see it on all the blogs, and it looks like all these other moms have it together.
Mhm.
And then we start to feel guilty and feel poorly about ourselves because we think, well, why don't I have it together? What's wrong with me? Why can't I
Mhm.
get my act together?
Yes.
And I think oftentimes that guilt causes more overwhelm in our minds because then we're trying to do even more so that we
Mhm.
can be like these other perfect homeschool moms.
Mhm.
And as you mentioned before, it's not a reality. We can never do that.
Yeah.
And I forget who I was talking to. It was sometime a while back, and it was a homeschool dad actually. And he said, I've realized that I will never, as long as my children are home being homeschooled, I will never have the perfect clean house and have a perfect, my children perfectly educated
Mhm.
and have it all, because you cannot have it all. It's
No.
not possible.
No.
So then, because we come in with this idea that we're bringing kind of the traditional school as we know it into our home, get overwhelmed because it's not working.
Mhm.
And then we just at times feel like just throwing up our hands and saying, okay, I'm done. I can't do this homeschool thing. Clearly, I'm not good
Mhm.
at it.
Yes.
That is never where we want moms to be.
No.
We exist as a ministry, Schoolhouse Rocked, to encourage moms and say, you've got this. You can do this. You can do it through the strength and the power of the Holy Spirit.
Mhm.
And he's gonna fill in all of the gaps. But give some very practical advice to moms who are feeling really overwhelmed and they're just feeling like, I just can't do this another day. Everything's a mess. My life is chaos. How in the world do they move forward?
Well, I first want to start with, you mentioned the gaps, and I think that is something that we get caught up in, because when I started homeschooling, like, I wanted to cover everything. I wanted to give my kids the best education ever, and there was not going to be a single gap anywhere. And what I've realized after years is that every education has gaps. I mean, you could spend
Right.
$150,000 a year for the best prep school there is, and your child will still have gaps in their education. So as a homeschool mom, we need to not fall into that trap of feeling like if we don't teach them everything, then we'll fail, because learning is a lifelong process. And
Right.
what we need to really do is give them the roots and the love of learning so that they can become lifelong learners and become well educated, as a matter of practice, not just when they're in school. So I think that's the first place to start, because I know that when I started kindergarten, like, I was trying to teach her everything there was to ever teach, and at one point I had like 12 different subjects on the roster. And now that we're coming towards the end and she's, probably about a year or two away from finishing, because she's just rapidly wants to get through it, I realized that there's no way that I could have taught her everything. And every once in a while, I think, oh, there was this and there was that. And I've realized all I can do is give her that foundation, like that Sound Foundation, which is
Right.
where I came up with the name, and the wings, and, set her free and know that I did the best I possibly could. Was it perfect? No. Could I have done some things better? Yes. But at the end of the day, I did everything I possibly could, and I gave it my all. And I just let God do the rest. So I think that's a first place to start to eliminate overwhelm.
Yeah. Let me say something on that really quickly too, is I feel like if we push our kids so hard because we feel like we have an agenda that
Mm-hmm.
has to be met, we've got all these boxes that we need to check off.
Yes.
Oftentimes what I've seen happen is that it really puts a strain on our relationship with our children,
Mm-hmm.
because then it becomes so much about the academics and checking off the boxes instead of building that relationship with our kids.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, and we're actually going to talk about this in the next episode, is nurturing a love of learning and teaching our kids how to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think building that relationship with them is so much more important than the academics, because when you have that, then they're going to be more willing to learn anyway. You know, I hear
Mm-hmm.
about moms who their kids are kicking and screaming and throwing tantrums, and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they don't want to learn. They don't want to do anything with school.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes I'm like, just take a step back, drop school for a little while. And by school, I mean the academic part of it,
Mm-hmm.
but drop the academics for a little while, build that relationship with your kids,
Mm-hmm.
and then slowly bring it back in. You don't have to do everything at once. I mean, you said you had a list of 12 different things you had to do, and you realized that there's just no way that's going to work.
Yes.
But building those relationships with our kids, and then
Mm-hmm.
slowly bringing in the other things that you want them to learn, and teach them how to love learning those
Mm-hmm.
things.
Yes. Yes. And when I was caught in a very bad season of overwhelm and struggle with my homeschool, I went to a homeschool conference, and Andrew Pudewa happened to be there, who I didn't really even know who he was before I went there. And I went to all of his conferences. And at the end, I got to actually speak to him, and I, kind of poured my heart out. And he's like, "It's okay. Like, you're doing okay." I'm like, "But she's not." He's like, "It'll come." He's like, "Just keep reading, and, it'll be okay." And he said, and the one thing that he said in one of his conferences that I kind of live by is, when nothing is working, just read good books. And so that's one of the, that's really what it comes to. I mean, that's where learning comes from, right? Is
Right.
books, not
Right.
textbooks and workbooks and tests. So if it's all falling apart and you're overwhelmed, just find a good pile of books, and your kids will be learning, even if it's not on your schedule, even if it's not like something you can check off on the curriculum. They're learning, and it gives you a chance to decompress. So we have regular reading weeks built into our year when everybody just reads. And so if they're behind on their academic reading, then they read that for the week. But otherwise, they just find something to read. And it gives me a chance to kind of catch my breath in between trimesters. But it also lets them just chase their own interests and not just be stuck in the list of what they have to read.
Right. Right. Yeah, totally. I love good books. And there are few better ways to build relationships with our kids than just sitting down
Yes.
with them and just reading a really good book with
Yes.
them. So the other thing that I know you're passionate about, and I have found to be very, very important in homeschooling, especially when we're feeling overwhelmed, is finding support.
Yes.
And I always, it's so funny because when I think about finding support, oftentimes people, especially kind of that millennial crowd, will think, well, I'll just go on Facebook and I'm going to find people there to help support me. And there are a lot of great resources on Facebook, and there are a lot of really well-meaning people and a lot of really wise people on there who, oftentimes I'll read questions and comments, and I'll think, yes, you're right on. And then other times people will put questions on there and there will be answers. And I'm like, no, you are so, no, don't do it that way. And so there's that social media end of it, but then there's also, of course, local support that people need. So how have you found ways to find good support in your homeschooling? And then how do you suggest other people to do that as well?
It took me a long time to find that, because I really had to get out of the school mentality and out of the circles that were connected to the school. I came from a long line of public school teachers, so everybody that I knew was somehow, connected to school. And then when my mom friends, like all their kids went to school, I just lost that whole safety net.
Right.
So there are more homeschoolers out there than anybody realizes. And I realize that some people live in very rural areas, but I guarantee you there's somebody who's homeschooling there. And I wish that I had known that from the beginning, that I hadn't just been following like blogs all across the country. Because I never realized we lived on a little lake, and there were actually 3 other homeschool families that lived on that lake. And it took me years to find out that they even existed.
Wow.
So now with social media, it's easier to find them, though, I feel. So if you go on Facebook and you put in like your local town or your state and homeschoolers, something will show up. And we are tapped into a very wonderful group of homeschoolers that I actually found randomly through a blog that I followed. There was a spin-off local Facebook group of people who followed it. And I actually most of them were homeschoolers, it turned out, and I connected with them, and that's how we got involved with them. And it's an amazing resource, because even though we're spread out pretty far, I mean, I'm on the northern reaches of it. Some people are up to like 2 hours south or west of here.
Okay.
And we try to meet in central locations. It really is wonderful because our kids have that support, and I know that they understand me and they speak the same language. Because I think that's a big thing when you start homeschooling and people don't understand it. It's hard to get that support, and you don't want people to know that you're struggling because you don't want them to say, well, see, I told you it never worked, or obviously you just can't do this. Because that's already in the back of your mind. Like, I'm not qualified, I can't do this, I'm never going to succeed, because of the fear. And you need to shut that out. Like, don't let the devil get your ear, because,
Right.
that's not the truth, but it's already there. And the last thing you need is for someone to actually say it to you. And then it makes it like it's real.
Right. Right. Yeah. Finding that support is so, so important.
Yes.
And people who will really encourage you in
Yes.
your walk.
Mm-hmm.
Just finding those like-minded families who will
Mm-hmm.
just say, let's do this together.
Yes.
So we are out of time for this
Yes.
podcast, but will you come back?
Yes.
Again, let's do a part 2, because I actually want to talk with you more about nurturing that love of learning in our kids. And then we have a few other things. You have some ways to transform your home and homeschool suggestions on that as well.
Okay.
So let's come back next time. We will talk more about that. Thank you guys for listening today. Jennifer, where can people find out more about you?
If you go to soundfoundationshomeschool.com, or you can find me on Pinterest and Facebook at Sound Foundations Homeschool.
Okay, great. And we'll put all of those links, of course, in the show notes so people can find them there. So thank you guys. Have a fantastic day, and we will see you back here next time. Bye.
Bye.